Going forward, I would like to present to you our next keynote speaker, Professor Eleni Papadonikolaki. She is an associate professor at the Bartlett School of Sustainable Construction at UCL. Eleni, the floor is yours. She's going to talk to us today about digitalization beyond BIM. Here you go.
Thank you very much, Iro. Nice to meet you all. Nice to meet all of you. I'll just stop this screen sharing. I'll share mine. Let me know if you can see that.
Yeah, all looks good.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation. I really like and subscribe to your vision about bringing these two communities of the AEC and computer science together. And it's also great to be among esteemed colleagues. So I will be speaking over the next 20-25 minutes approximately about digitalization beyond BIM. I will be framing that a bit around data and information as well as projects. Just a couple of words about myself. So I'm a former architect. I was always interested in digital technologies and very much motivated by building information modeling and computation in architecture. And now at UCL, I am an associate professor and I'm looking at digital innovation and management, and also I'm the course director of a new MSc on digital engineering management. And at the same time, I bring a lot of practical experience as a management consultant. So just a brief outline. Okay, it's a small keynote. So I will be speaking about data and information and then linking to the digital thread, which is something very interesting for the sector. And then I will end with an outlook, and of course I will pose some questions perhaps that we could have a broader discussion about. I think the past year, more than a year actually, the COVID-19 pandemic has also showed us the importance of the physical space and how important its built environment for living, working, and also healing. And against this backdrop, I'm thinking about the future of the AEC sector, because at the moment it has a very poor image, and this essentially has an impact on how construction can get new talent, new people to work. So there is a term, especially in the UK, where I'm based, of skill shortage, and approximately 56 of construction organizations have experienced these so-called key shortages in the sector. At the same time, perhaps that might be a good moment now for Fuxin to share a poll with us, so that we can, thanks Fuxin, so we can understand more about the makeup of this audience, but I can adjust my talk. So which option characterizes your industry better? The options are architecture, engineering, construction, computer science, or others. So you can use the chat to add any other industry where you come from. So let's take a few moments to fill the scene. Fuxin, when we have around 80% participants, respondents, sorry, then we can just release the results so that I can have a look at it. Is it a good moment now? Okay, great. So, okay, wow, that's truly amazing. So 40% computer science and the rest around 50% from architecture. So a very well balanced audience. I'll try to speak for all of you. Many thanks. So the AEC industry, architecture, engineering, construction, has a very strange relation with innovation. Essentially, the AEC typically imports innovation from other sectors. In the past, that was more from the manufacturing industry, but now we see a lot of new ideas coming in from computer science. And at the same time, the AEC has very high resistance. It's very slow to change. And because it's very fragmented, I will expand on this shortly, there are a lot of differences among tiers and how they innovate, how they explore new opportunities and new developments. And because we're talking about data, about computer science, there is a link to digital innovation, which is very recombinant in a sense with the Schubertian view of recombinative innovation. And this means that it's also distributed across many different sectors. So we don't have just one player who is responsible for innovation, but we have a network of interconnected organizations that rely one with the other to innovate. So this brings us to understand that construction and innovation, especially digital innovation in construction, it's an unbounded phenomenon. So we can't just locate it in different parts of the supply chain or the project lifecycle. Just a couple key features about the AEC industry. I understand that Derek also provided some very nice information, especially about construction projects being over time and over budget. It's also very important to explain also that the AEC industry has a project-based business model. This means that the main source of income comes from projects, and there's a lot of effort into bidding for projects and then successfully delivering them. And then the knowledge is typically fragmented because of jumping from one project to the other. And at the same time, typically construction projects, they have very unique products, as we say, with very high demand and supply variability. Other structural characteristics, especially in the EU, where I'm based, it's very fragmented as an industry. So more than 95% are SMEs. And of those 95%, 99% are micro enterprises of 1 to 4 people. So you understand that on every construction site, there are so many different organizations involved, so many different people working around the construction site. And this is what we say also, that it's broken into numerous tiers. So we typically have the contractors and then a lot of subcontractors who are taking part into the risk allocation. Now, my view about data and digitalization comes a lot from an information processing view, which essentially tell us that the greatest the task uncertainty, the greater the amount of information that must be processed among the decision makers in an organization. So this essentially brings this socio-technical view I have that information always sits between human things and data things. So I'll expand a bit more about that, but I also want to define projects. So we'll talk a lot about projects, and because I come from a project management background, it's interesting to see how information, it's a key part of the job of project managers, as every project is a nexus of processing a lot of information from different players, from different contractors, from different actors across the supply and demand chain. At the same time, you've probably seen a diagram like that sometime at your career or at your studies. It's a very popular diagram, a pyramid. No one knows where it's attributed anymore, that connects data with information. And I like this distinction. I want to expand more on that. Essentially, data being some very small pieces of information that are meaningless on their own, and they just need context in order to be understood and to participate into find their way into decision making, if you like. So data, they have some potential information, but there needs to be some processing, essentially attributing some context in order to make them and describe them as information. And then this goes to knowledge and so on, but I won't be expanding on knowledge today. At the same time, everyone's talking about data the last years. Data is king. There's a huge increase in digital data capturing and analysis. And this, as you all know, takes place because we have a lot of devices than we had in the past. So not only our laptops or mobiles, we We have a lot of headsets and also drones and UAVs to do work for us. We have better internet connectivity, so it's faster to work with a large amount of data. And we have more powerful computers, better infrastructure and computer power, as well as different connected technology. So this is not only in construction, but it's a phenomenon around many industries. So because of this importance and proliferation of data, then we understand that essentially in this parameter that we saw before, we have a lot of more sources of data coming from, for example, in construction, coming from inspections, different risk registers, progress reports, compliance, and a lot of location and tracking information. So all of this creates tension between the data and the information that we discuss. A lot of tension there, because yes, we have a lot of data, but we are in a position that it makes it harder to make sense of all this data. And this is a new need, one of the new emerging needs of the construction industry. As I mentioned before, I like this distinction. Let's keep it for now, but we can reflect also in the Q&A. Data is not information. For me, information is more socio-technical, as I said, because it brings the data and the decision makers, humans, together. And at the same time, they affect organizational structures and roles. So we have, of course, data scientists who are capturing, acquiring, cleaning, storing, and analyzing data. But we do need information managers or similar, could be project managers, depending on the scale of the projects, who have this domain expertise. Now, construction industry, the AEC, it's an industry which is still learning. So there is a lot of potential. And in the future, these boundaries between data and information might be even more blurred. But for the moment, we are in need of the data scientists, but also the information managers and the domain experts who are going to make sense of the information out of this data that can help decision making. And other roles that they have, of course, is to provide information to the right people at the right moment and filter also the information. So not pass on everything, but only the important things to understand progress, for example, of construction works. Now, if we think of the project lifecycle from design to preparation, construction, handover, and operation, we have a lot of fragmentation during the handover. Sometimes, for different reasons, these phases might be even broken, especially during the bidding process of a new project. But because things might just simply go wrong, there are a lot of uncertainties, especially with financing. So we have a lot of handover points and a lot of information and data going missing. At the same time, especially in the design, where the architects and the designers are, we have a lot of involvement from users, like clients, and the same goes also to the operation. So these two phases, the design, the operation, they're more user-centric. And in the middle, where construction is, we have people who are more empiricists, if you like, and we have a lot of potential for automation, for further work with data capturing, but also up to analysis, as we discussed before. So a lot of things to be done there and a lot of potential for computer science and the AEC coming together. Now, of course, the traditional information handover, it's very paper-based. I remember Derek showed some drawings as well. And for those who are very young and don't remember, these at the right-hand side, lower corner, these are how they used to store asset information. So essentially every asset had a little room where they could put the data in the form of these large sheets of drawings. And whenever there was a problem, like a light bulb, someone would take out these large sheets of paper and try to read what sort of maintenance is needed in an asset. So we don't have all these things now, of course, and the industry is moving more towards the digitalisation. So at this point, because there are many technologies, we discussed a bit about BIM, different realities, and so on. I'd like to say a couple of things more about the state of digitalization in the industry. From McKinsey, we have this very famous graphic that's around for the past 5 years, where construction is very low at the bottom of this matrix, where it's very low in digitization with regards to the assets, the usage, and the labor, so the work of the people in the industry. So it's not doing very well. I'm not sure if this has been updated. Perhaps someone might know, but I don't think that that might be more. That might be very higher than what it is now, just before agriculture. At the same time, because there are all these different terms and buzzwords, I'd like to provide some definitions as well. So digitization, it's mostly technical. It has to do with the work of moving from analog to binary in terms of data, whereas digitalization has to do with technology in use and thinking more about processes, innovation processes, changing things, such as also business model innovation. And ultimately, this leads to digital transformation, which is more at the system level, at an industry level, and implies restructuring the industry, restructuring the economies, and doing things in a completely different way. So in construction, in the AEC industry, we've seen a lot of changes, and mostly accelerated the past 20 years with regards to BIM, essentially, that has started to emerge. But at the same time, we're talking a lot about wanting to move more the digital transformation. And this also is a need which is more emphasized lately because of the different net zero visions that are pushing the industry to do things more efficiently, to cut waste, to use data and information in a more efficient way. So there's a lot of pressure for construction to do better for not only efficiency reasons, but also sustainability and environmental sustainability reasons. At the same time, just a very passing reference about building information modeling. So most of you must be familiar with it. It's a technology which is used for generating, for authoring, generating, storing, but also sharing information. Now, this diagram, it's one of my least favorite diagrams, if you like, because it's very misleading. So I think these central ideas of having a technology that's companies can just buy off the shelf, implement it in a project and solve their problems. It's a very misleading notion, because essentially what happens is that we have a lot of different groups of people, teams of people working into designing spaces, communicating, negotiating, and they're using not only BIM, but also a lot of different technologies. But BIM, despite not being an off-the-shelf solution to solve all our problems, it's very good as a basis to structure the information and can provide it can provide essentially the link we want, the platform we want, in order to create digital threads. Here's just a quick diagram about research going on around BIM, which has seen a proliferation, especially the last years, and it attracts a lot of attention from all around the world. A lot of researchers are looking at digital and especially BIM and how it can connect. So this brings us to the concept of digital thread, yet another concept, another buzzword. One of these that construction really likes to import from other sectors, such as the manufacturing. And essentially what digital thread is trying to say is that it's a data-driven approach that connects all the information generated across a product lifecycle. And it's very important in order to avoid this fragmentation. So across this lifecycle that we have discussed previously, this project life cycle, we have all these breaking points that need extra attention in order to connect this digital thread and essentially try to have a better integration among people, data, and technology. Okay, Just approaching towards the end, some of the emerging issues that I've discussed in this past 20 minutes, the architecture and perhaps the engineering sector as well, I think they have lost a bit of momentum in digitalization. And I'm saying that from the side that because we start generating digital data and information through BIM at the front end of projects, of building the concept and the design stage, there's a lot of opportunity there to do better work in order to have this integrated digital threads. At the same time, the AEC industry really loves its buzzwords, but this might create some silos of pockets of innovation that don't necessarily talk to one another. So there's a lot of effort perhaps to be done there. Project execution or construction, if you like, and the handover, they're the least digitized phases of the AEC in general. And there are a lot of traditional practices there that rely a lot on workers. On the other hand side, as we started our talk with skill shortage and the image of construction, there is going to be a lot more of that, especially in the UK. So there's a lot of skill shortage, both on construction sites, but also on estate offices that they're not very digitized. And this is because of the aging workforce, the lack of new talent, not young, but new talent entering the field, and a lot of restrictions in movement of workers among countries, for example, Brexit. But now, because of COVID, there are additional restrictions for people to work in construction. So some implications responding to the points I have just said. There's more a need for leadership around the areas of digital data and technology in general, needed from the side of the architects and the designers who start the initiated this digital thread that we discussed. At the same time, there is more need for the AC firms to become more ambidextrous, and I mean not only seeking to exploit digital innovation, not only looking in order to make a return on investment and a profit from adding a bit of BIM in their process, but they also need to explore new ideas, have new people, have data scientists to work with them and innovate and create new processes and new workflows. As I mentioned also at some point at the beginning of my talk, the AC is of course in a transition, and as it goes, data and information will become more blurred in the future. So perhaps this distinction I started with might not be there in the future, as domain experts who have a lot of experience by working on sites and construction will develop data expertise. So this is something that we are not seeing so much now, but this is something that hopefully in the future we will be able to be proud about. And finally, we need to align digital innovations or data or technology, let's put it under an umbrella, with human and social capital. So this means investing in new talent, either new people entering construction or people from computer science coming into construction in order to work with their passion. For example, computer vision, there are so many of you here, and it's great to see all this work that you have been doing, but also people from construction who want to develop more data expertise and essentially use it in order to help the industry move forward. Other ideas that are very critical for firms, especially as we discussed business models, they're the typical make or buy decision. Are we buying this innovation, or are we making it ourselves? So this is also something that a lot of AEC industry and the AEC firms are looking to answer. And finally, there's always a need to align the technology with the supply chain, because it's a strategic decision in such a fragmented and project-based sector. And the bonus question, if you like, because this is something that I'm truly interested about. If anyone has any ideas, I'd love to hear that. How could we use data and digital technology to make the AEC a more attractive industry for both the existing and the new talent coming? So thank you very much. And any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Eleni, for the great presentation. It was very informative. While we're waiting for questions to come, and again, I remind to the audience, you can use the Q&A interface of Zoom, or you can raise your hand and you can speak. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the question you asked.
Sorry, was it for me, Iro?
Sorry?
Sorry, I didn't catch the last one. Could you please repeat that?
I was wondering if you have any thoughts you would like to share on the question you mentioned at the end of your presentation.
Yeah, I'd love to, because as I started working as an architect more than 15 years ago, I was very much interested into the technology, but at that point there was a lot of things about digital technology for especially form finding in architecture, which is good, but for me it wasn't bringing me closer to the process and to the efficiency and to the improvement of the sector. So this is why I started looking more on supply chain management and technology such as BIM. So I'd like to hear more perhaps from anyone around the audience or the panelists about how they think that this has been impacting the happiness of the people, making them feel less frustrated with their job and more proud to work in this sector.
Thank you so much. We have a question from your mystery. Can you share your thoughts on training architecture and engineering students to be better prepared to use domain expertise with data?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we're trying to do, especially in undergraduates, of course, we try to expose them to building information modeling, but what we've also understood is that it's very important for them to understand data. And especially in the postgraduate level, what we're doing is we are teaching the students about Python, about using some basic software languages that they could be more mathematical. So for example, R it's quite easy, but this is something to introduce the students into this world and to understand that it's not only spreadsheets that we can be using in construction, because this is something that it's not it's not fit for purpose to use spreadsheets because of the amount of data that we have. So we're training our students more to use the technology and to be able to understand how to make decisions. And also something which is very important, and I try to stress to all of my students at any level, is that, yeah, okay, we will teach you some of the technology, either the software, the programming languages, or the software tools, for example, around BIM, but it's your job to keep learning around that, because things such as the off-the-shelf solutions that I mentioned before, I don't want to name any companies, but the off-the-shelf solutions, they're there and they're continuously changing. So it's, as an educator, it's not the job of the academe to essentially train software, but it's good to provide some principles to our students so that they keep learning. The industry, the AEC, needs to be train itself or retrain itself to keep learning and to be an industry which will be dynamic and able to address any uncertainties and changes coming.
I agree with a lot of your points. I want to conclude, but before that, I want to ask you one last question. You mentioned in your presentation about the, especially how the project execution phase lacks a lot in automation. And I'm wondering if you see any first frontiers that automation could help in that specific sector.
Yeah, so execution, this includes also the work that you have been presenting today in the conference. So that's great, because all the things that I saw discussed today, this is a frontier actually. This is what we need to be doing in order to have, for example, less people working on sites, because this will make sites essentially more safe for people. But at the same time, when people are working on sites, they should be able to do meaningful work, and work that it does not allow any bias or personal judgment. So it should be objective, and using data for that, it's the way forwards to be able to identify how to monitor the information, and how to inspect, and how to make decisions based on the data that you have in front of you. So it's not anymore just walking around with paper checklists or drawings in the rain, for example.
Thank you so much, Eleni. Actually, Fred Boucher, one of the other keynote speakers, made an interesting comment. Says, we are both Greek architects now involved in computer science and digitalization. What's up? I will leave that question for you, Eleni, to answer in the panel discussion. And I think there is one more. There are some questions in the Q&A that you can check, and you can, if you want, you can address them yourself via text. Fun fact, me and Eleni were together in undergrad, so Fred, this question hits closer to home as you would think. Thank you so much, Eleni.